8:01.
So here we are back after a short break. It is still Senate Government Operations and it is still Wednesday, February 2nd. So we, on our schedule, we have that we're taking up 181, which in fact we are going to do. But before we do that, we just got one of those fast emergency bills this morning referred to us. I think it's H 693, which is the Northeast Kingdom's annual meeting. And we didn't do it when we did the regular town meeting. So I would like Tucker to just walk us through that. And we have passed this before. We passed this last year. We have passed it before, but I'd like to get it taken care of. I don't think it's controversial at all. And since we've already passed it, so that we can get it to the floor and get it done. So with your indulgence, I will ask Tucker to do that for, it'll probably take us a full at least 5 minutes. Yes, go ahead, Tucker.
Good afternoon, everyone. Tucker Anderson, Office of Legislative Counsel. H693 contains one discrete component of H48, which became Act 1 last year. It occupied one subdivision, and it concerns the annual budget of the Northeast Kingdom Solid Waste Management District. The bill has one operative section, and it states that notwithstanding any contrary provision of law, in the year 2022, the Board of Supervisors of the Northeast Kingdom Waste Management District may vote to adopt the district's annual budget for the ensuing fiscal year. Brief background, the reason that this particular waste management district needs special authority here is that their charter for the district requires that they have a town by town vote of their member municipalities where the voters approve the district budget. Other waste management districts approve their budget through a vote of their Board of Supervisors. So essentially what they're asking for is for this year, the authority to do what they did last year, which is have their Board of Supervisors approve the annual budget.
So I think that we were hoping after last year that they would have changed their process, but they didn't. So here we are again this year. They just don't want to change their process, I guess. But that's okay. That's not our business. But committee does anybody have any questions about this? We have passed this in the past. And
when is the annual meeting?
Tucker, do you know? I'm not sure here. I just lost you all.
You're still here.
We haven't lost you.
All I can see is one person at a time. Okay, I'll figure this out.
Yeah,
Maybe
speaker
it's
view.
gone to speaker view somehow.
Okay, so Tucker, do you want to, when is, I don't know when their annual meeting is.
It must be around town meeting.
On meeting day.
It was town meeting day again, because they are conducting their district-wide vote in each of the member municipalities that belong to the district. It was on the annual meeting dates of those member municipalities, which prior to the authority under Act 1, and I can't remember the act number, but the act that you just passed a few weeks ago, now those municipalities are voting on different dates, and the district can't piggyback on the member municipalities' annual meetings. But it
So
will
it's
be
time.
March.
Yes. So they are asking us to allow them to do it in a different manner this year. So Senator Clarkson,
I'm just curious how many towns are in this district.
I think it's like 20 or something. It's a lot.
It's huge, right?
Karen or Gwen might know, or Tucker. It is very big. So do we need to take more testimony on this, or since we've already passed it at least once, maybe twice? Can we just pass it so that it can get to the governor so they know what they can do?
I would move. I'm happy to make a motion.
Okay.
I would move that we pass H 693 as presented.
All right. Senator Ram, are you ready to call the roll?
Sure.
Okay, great.
Okay. Senator Clarkson,
Yes.
Senator Collmore,
Yes.
Senator Polina,
Yes.
myself, Senator Ram Hinsdale, yes, Senator White,
Yes.
5-0.
So Senator Collmore, do you want to report this one?
Sure.
Okay. You seem to be our go-to charter and this kind of thing reporter. So thank you. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, committee. As soon as it came to us, it made sense
we-
for us to get. Yes,
When it comes up on the floor after he reported it, should we ask for the rules to be suspended and put in all stages of passage so we
Yeah.
can move it along quickly?
Yeah.
yeah, we should. We should, and so Senator Collmore, if you want to check with your caucus, and Allison, if you want to check with ours, to just make sure there's no issues around suspending the rules.
I'm sure there won't be on my side.
Yeah. Okay, all right. So, and we'll let the pro tem know that we intend to do that. Thank you, Senator Polina.
My pleasure.
All right, so let's go to 181. And I think that where we ended was at, as I remember it, we ended at page 6. Is that,
Oh.
Yes.
okay? And Tucker, that's what you remember too? Great. Then do you want to start walking us? Yes, Gwen.
We had skipped over the provision that dealt with storm drains, I believe, and that's why Peter Walk is here. So I don't know if you want to go
Yes.
back up and then keep going, or
Well, that's a good question. I guess we could take his testimony first so that he doesn't have to sit and listen to our entire, the rest of the day. Although maybe we should keep him captive here. And he can, no, I'm sorry. So Peter, do you want to, it is on in the bill, it is on page 3, lines 12 through 15. And yeah, so if you would like, we were just concerned that there might be some issues around with ANR around water runoff and stuff. So
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Peter Walk, Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Conservation. Appreciate the opportunity to come in. I think my testimony might be shorter than your consideration of the last bill. We do not see concerns associated with this language relative to our authority and have no issue with it. And so happy to answer questions about that, but that's pretty much the extent of it.
I don't know how we can get a question out of that.
That may be your simplest testimony all session, Peter Walk.
One can only hope that it's matched at some other point, but I probably not.
Does anybody have any questions on that?
No.
Okay,
No, we're
great.
delighted. Good news.
Thank you so much. We just felt that we needed to check in with you to make
I
sure.
appreciate the opportunity to be checked in with. It's good to know. It's nice to be with you all since we don't get to spend much time here in this committee. So with that, I will bid you adieu.
Adieu.
Thank you.
I
Thank
do.
All right, Tucker, now, thank you, Gwen. That was thoughtful. So Tucker, now we will go to page 6.
Thank you all, and I wanted to pause before we move on so that I can give, if Gordon is available, Gordon Merrick the opportunity to introduce himself to the committee. He's the legislative counsel, law clerk. He will be working with me on some of the issues within this bill moving forward, so I wanted to make sure he had an opportunity to introduce himself, and you could put a face to the name that will be appearing in some of the work moving forward.
Thank you. And Gordon, welcome. So we'll introduce ourselves to you. And then you can tell us how you like working with Tucker. So I'm Jeanette White and I'm from Wyndham County.
Hi, I'm Anthony Pauline of Washington County.
Brian Collmore, representing the Rutland County District.
Allison Clarkson, Windsor County District.
Aisha Ram Hinsdale, Chittenden County, and I know you helped me with something because I recognize your name from the email, so thank you for that.
Are you a law clerk from the law school? No. You're a law clerk, not an intern.
Yeah, I graduated from Vermont Law in 2020. And yeah, I've been enjoying this clerkship. I was an intern back in the 2017, 2018 year. And I worked in this community a little bit due to the cannabis issue. I was working with Michelle Childs. So
Well, that's where I know your name.
That's, yeah, and we've seen you.
yeah. So excited to be back in the office and helping out. And yeah, if you need
Good.
anything and you don't want to talk to Tucker, you can talk to me.
Well, we might talk to you, but we always love talking to Tucker, so. All right, thank you. Thank you, Tucker, for that. Okay,
So the business at hand, page 6 of S 181. We had left off just prior to section 3. Section 3 would add a new section 2646A to title 17 concerning a town vote to allow the election of non-residents to town offices. To bring you back to the original walkthrough, this would not withstand the requirements of section 2646 to allow a municipality to propose to allow non-residents to be elected as town officers. This proposal would have to be approved by the voters at an annual or special meeting warned for that purpose. The proposal can be brought either by the legislative body or by petition of 5% of the voters. The proposal itself must specifically identify the town office that may be filled by a non-resident, and voting shall be conducted by Australian ballot.
okay.
Were we going to go through and say that we either approve or not approve of each of the sections?
I think we kind of did, didn't we? Thank you, Senator Collmore, that I was just going through here to see where we had issues, and I think that I flagged the issues here, the property management issue, the vacant buildings, and those are the only two I have flagged right now. So, yeah, if anybody has wants to address that,
Yeah, I think I want to flag this particular section. then,
okay.
As you might imagine.
Okay. This would say, if you elect a lister, your lister doesn't have to come from Putney. We could elect a lister from Dummerston. This doesn't have anything to do with voting, right? Tucker, is that right?
That is correct. It would be for the office itself. So whatever the elected office that's named in the proposal from the municipality, the town could vote to allow a non-resident to be elected to that position.
But it's non-residents, not non-citizens.
And I will note that there is one, it's not in this section, but there is one notable exception to this because there is a municipal office that is subject to constitutional requirements for election as a state officer, and that would be the justices of the peace for a municipality would still have to be elected according to the Constitution and would have to come from the town that is electing them.
So is this under the ordinance? I can't remember. Is this under the ordinance section or is this under the, no, where is this?
This is grouped with the second big block of authority, and that is authority for the municipality that is approved by the voters. So this is a voter approved municipal authority.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. I couldn't remember. Okay. All right. I put a flag beside it.
Oh, good. You're putting a flag beside all of section 3, because I don't know why this is a good thing. I think it's a good thing that our town officers be residents of the town.
Well, we're not, yeah. Do we
I mean,
want to talk about that now?
No, we're just going through right now to flag, and I would agree with Brian. I think this needs flagging. I don't have much interest in opening up select board to being non-residents or listers, or, I mean, I don't have much interest in expanding that.
Okay, we'll
But
flag
I'm
that.
happy to be educated about it, but it's,
We'll flag it.
great.
Okay,
I love it when you say flag. It's very Minnesota.
it is.
It's a very interesting A. It's a Minnesota A.
Flag.
Flag. It's got a special je ne sais quoi.
Oh, yeah. Okay, then. Let's move on. Tucker?
Moving on to section 4. This would amend the statute that governs the number of listers and select board members on the listers or the select board to allow a municipality to expand the membership of their select board beyond the current cap of 5 members.
Okay.
Okay.
Anybody? Gwen?
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt, but I thought I'd just jump in the interest of time. I think we are going to ask that this section of the bill be removed. The reason being, not because we don't like the section, we think it's a good idea, but we think it needs just a little bit more vetting. We've come to a sort of issue running into the Board of Civil Authority and Board of Abatements, and having them be parts of certain certain measures where the select board also takes part in determinations. And with increasing the number of select board members, potentially there could be allegations of an undue influence or increased influence by having more select board members have voices. So we would like to remove this section, put it on the back burner, and sort of correct some of those things and figure out if we can figure out a way to get around them in maybe a later bill.
Okay, we can do that if you want to. I thought this was a slam dunk, because
So did
why we would
until we
care.
came upon this BCA and Board of Abatement issue. So we'll
Isn't
try to
the
find a
BC
way around it.
The BCA is made up of the justices of the peace, right?
Mhm.
You would, I don't know how many towns have less than, say, 10 justices of the peace. So it would be a little unlikely that you would ever have more select board members than 10, but okay, well, we'll put that out. Okay. Okay, Tucker?
The next section can be found on page 7. It is section 5. It would amend 17 VSA section 2651A to allow a municipality by town vote, by Australian ballot, at an annual meeting to eliminate the office of constable. To bring you back, if the town votes to eliminate the office of constable, the select board shall appoint a qualified law enforcement officer who need not be a resident of the town. The law enforcement officer that is appointed in this manner shall discharge the same duties subject to 24 VSA section 1936A, which describes the duties and qualifications of a constable. And I would encourage you to check that statute out at some point, because some of the duties that a constable is empowered to perform are fairly interesting. The section goes on to state that a vote to eliminate the office of constable shall remain in effect until rescinded by a majority vote of the registered voters present and voting at an annual meeting warned for that purpose. Subdivision 4 states that the term of office of any constable on the date that a town votes to eliminate the office shall expire either 45th day after the vote or upon the date which the select board appoints a law enforcement officer under this section, whichever occurs first. And in my initial walkthrough, I pointed out that this is a similar structure that the General Assembly has used for the elimination of some of the other town offices, where the office is eliminated, but there is the selection and appointment of a qualified replacement to discharge the duties that are assigned to that particular municipal officer under statute.
I'm going to flag this one because I think this is this presents issues way beyond what it seems.
I
agree.
agree. I have a constable in my district that if I voted to eliminate the position, I wouldn't feel safe walking around.
So my problem is not, because the town is the one that's going to eliminate the constables, not us. And we already have the ability to eliminate constables in town. But what this does is, in fact, says that if they eliminate the constable position, they have to appoint a certified law enforcement officer, which
Right.
is in fact creating a police department in their town. And now the select board becomes a law enforcement agency. I think this is very problematic.
Is not the position of constable in the Constitution? No?
No, and you don't have
Sheriff,
to,
I think is the only one. Sheriff.
Okay.
and we already have the ability to eliminate constables. And and constables don't have to have law enforcement authority.
But we
So-
have required them to get further training if they carry a gun, I believe.
No, if the select board, the select board has to vote to allow the constable to do more than just kick somebody out of town meeting. In fact, to have law enforcement authority. And if they have law enforcement authority, then they have to become certified as a law enforcement officer.
Right.
It isn't whether they carry a gun or not. It's if they have law enforcement authority.
Authority, right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Tucker?
Senator Collmore, the office of constable is not required by the Constitution, but amazingly, the constables at the local level have a duty in the Constitution, and that is to seal up the votes that are received at the general election in each town. So they are the canvas bag sealers for the canvassing committee, I'm pretty sure.
I knew
And
there
then-
was a connection to the Constitution somehow.
And then they bring them up to the State House and dump them on the table.
That's right.
Yes. And they're there every election overseeing the ballot machine, at least in our town they are.
That's Senator Polina.
I don't understand how they could not be in the Constitution, but have a duty in the Constitution.
Remember, our Constitution was written by Ethan Allen and a bunch of soldiers
Drunk
while
guys.
they were waiting for battle in the middle of a
Snow-
thunderstorm.
rainstorm, yeah.
So,
They were confused.
yes.
So, Madam Chair, on that line 12, appoint a qualified law enforcement officer. Does that also mean appointing that a town could elect to appoint the state police? I mean, is that an alternative to the law enforcement officer? I mean, could that be interpreted to be the state police?
It might be, but it doesn't say that. It says shall appoint a qualified law enforcement officer.
Right, I know it does, but I was wondering if that could also be interpreted as a little more broadly, but I guess not.
I think of it, when I think that, I think of it as a state trooper who gets hired by the town to work with them during his free time or something like that. It
Right,
does seem like it has to be a police officer of some sort.
Right,
You're not going to make a living being a constable of drop out of the state police, become a constable in Guilford or something.
You get
No,
paid
but-
by the hour, but your contract, I mean, I believe they function on a contract basis.
But what this does, in fact, is creates a police department in a
Sure.
town because they are now the employer of a certified law enforcement officer, where they may not have, if they only have a constable that does not have law enforcement authority, and they elect to eliminate that, now they have to have a law enforcement officer replace that constable. So that creates them as a law enforcement agency. And I think that's problematic.
Agreed.
Yep. Flag it.
I'm flagging that. Okay. Okay, Tucker, ooh,
Moving along to section 6, which is on page 8, this would add a new section 2668 to title 17 concerning the recall of local officials. This would provide that any elected municipal officer may be removed from office subject to the procedure outlined in the section for a voter-initiated petition. A petition for a vote on the question of recalling the official shall be signed by not less than 15% of the active voters of the municipality and presented to the legislative body or the clerk. When the petition is submitted in accordance with this section, the legislative body shall call a special meeting within 60 days of receipt of the petition or include an article in the warning for the upcoming annual meeting if it falls within the same period to determine whether the voters will remove the elected municipal officer. When the petition is approved by a majority of the ballots cast at the special or annual meeting, the officer named in the petition shall cease to hold office. A vacancy that results from this shall be filled according to our general law for the filling of vacancies. And finally, a recall petition shall not be brought against an individual elected municipal officer more than once in any 12-month period. So you get one bite at the apple per year.
so can I ask just a technical question here? So first, 15% of the voters have to sign a petition saying they want it either as an article or in a special meeting. Then they have the special meeting or they put it on the article of warning. And then there's a townwide vote about whether to recall the person or not. So it's really kind of citizen involvement at two levels.
That is correct. First, petition has to be brought by 15% of the active registered voters. Then there's either a special or annual meeting article that is voted on by the entire town. If that article fails, then there's a 12-month period where the petition cannot be brought again against the same officer.
Karen?
Yeah, I'm just thinking that we may have skipped a step here, or in charters where towns do this, the town actually first votes to institute the practice, right? So they say, we are going to allow for recall of local officials, but this just jumps immediately to the process. And it doesn't provide for the question in general being asked about, are we going to allow for a recall of local officials? Do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I can envision a number of instances where if this is just put in the statute, you're going to have some recall petitions, for particular people, but not having addressed the question overall of does this town want recall of local officials as a practice?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Senator Plana?
On the other hand, it seems, when I read it, it seems to imply that we're saying that any town could do this, which is the opposite of what we're trying to do in here, because we're trying not to dictate the towns. But when we first read it, I was like, okay, we're going to give every town the ability to remove somebody subject to the procedure of the petition.
Right, which is sort
Not
of
saying
what
it's a
I'm
good thing. I'm just
saying.
saying it could be read that way, that we're giving every town the power to do it.
We are.
I think that is what you're doing here, but you're not giving the town the ability to make a determination as to whether they want to have recall in their community or not.
Right.
Well, the way I'm reading, I'm not going to belabor this, but the way I'm reading it, I'm thinking that we're saying that they are going to have the ability to do recalls.
Right. That is what
Yes.
we're saying.
Yes,
They don't have to have the conversation first about whether they want to have recallability or not. If we pass this, they do have recallability, whether they want it or not.
and I think that the difficulty there is that you're jumping immediately from the general conversation about is recall a good thing to select person, Tom Jones is a bad select person, we're going to recall him.
Mhm.
Which is particular, a particular circumstance.
I actually think you're right. And I would put that step in there first, that the town needs to have the conversation first before we get 15% of the voters exercised about one select board member. Gwen?
And just clarity in this to mandate that it be by Australian ballot, because it's sort of alluded to, but it's not entirely clear, but just explicitly say that there is an Australian ballot methodology about going about these votes. So there's standardization.
Why would we require them to do it by Australian ballot?
I think with such a huge change and such a big move, I think that having that standardization and that kind of like paper trail, I think would put, I think there's a level of security in that. I mean, that would be my gut instinct right there, because you're taking away, a huge job, and an elected official might be, stripped of their duties and their title. I think that having a paper trail might make much more sense.
So could the general conversation about whether or not they want to do it be held on the floor, but the actual recall had to happen by Australian ballot?
I think that makes sense. I mean, I haven't thought that through, but for sure the two steps that Karen mentioned, I think makes absolute sense. That was our intention to begin with. It was just like, just like the charters that came to you that had these provisions, they had to vote to have whether or not they even wanted it, right? So that makes sense. But I think, yeah, the first step, if they're just making the determination of whether they want to even allow it, it probably could be by the floor, especially if it's done at an annual meeting and that's how they conduct their business.
Yeah. That's the way I would look at it, is that can happen in a general conversation about what's good about it, what's not good about it, why should we do it? But then for a very specific one, it would have to be by Australian ballot. Does that make sense, Tucker? I don't know if other people agree with that or not.
Yeah.
Committee members, I heard Brian.
Yep.
So, sorry,
I don't disagree with you. It's a complicated issue in a way. I mean, if you're doing it on the floor and you got a select board sitting in the front of the room and they're going to vote to like eliminate somebody from the select board.
No. You only would be having, the conversation would only be about, should we allow our town to have recall votes or not?
Right.
It wouldn't be about the recall of a specific person.
but then if there was a recall of a specific person, that would be by Australian ballot, I assume.
Right, that's
Right.
Yeah.
So there are two procedures we're really enabling here. One is we're enabling the towns to have a recall ability. And two, once they have it, we're enabling them to do it and exercise it.
without having to put it in a charter.
Correct. Is that right?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you might want to vote to have a recall ability, and you might not, a town might not use it for 10 years.
That is the
Right,
case.
or hopefully
some
never use it.
Have it.
What, Karen?
I said that is the case with some towns that have it in their
Yeah.
charter.
You mean that they've never used it?
That they have, yeah, or they've only used it very occasionally.
May I ask a
Okay.
question of Ledge Council?
Sure.
That 15% threshold, is that also in other charters?
Yes, the most recent charter, in fact, which was Underhill, I believe. That was the threshold, the most recent threshold that was used. However, again, that is a policy determination that the committee can make to increase or decrease that petition threshold if 15% is too high or too low for this particular vote.
I don't know how other people feel, but I don't have any strong feelings about 15% or 10%, but I don't think it should be much lower than 15% because you're talking about recalling a person, and that's I think that you have to have a pretty substantial number of people in the community that are upset before you should do this.
Yeah, I agree, Madam Chair. I think sometimes someone can be very unpopular with as much as 30-40% of the citizenry. And yet, I don't know. I agree. I don't think it should be any less than 15. Whether it should be higher than that, I don't have a strong feeling either. But what we don't want is for a small group of people to be able to, in essence, persecute somebody, I think.
Yes, that concerns me.
That's why I brought up the question of whether or not this was the stand, because again, this is like a relatively new concept because it's not allowed really elsewhere other than the handful of communities that have it in their charter. So, and it also hasn't been used by those communities very often. So, where that threshold, I agree. I think 15% should be the minimum. It might make more sense to even, but scooch it up a little bit. But I just wanted to know, just to gauge where it had been before, whether it had been higher and this was chosen as a lower threshold. But it's, I don't know.
Senator Clarkson?
So maybe Tucker, it would make some sense if we found out what other municipalities around the country do. What, if there are other recall models that we could look at and look at what their thresholds are.
Well, there's California.
I was
Well,
just
maybe we're-
looking for that percentage because I lived through
Yeah,
that.
I mean, they do
Just
everything
wrong.
by referendum. I mean, they do a ton of referendums and propositions, and they're always
Yeah,
generally.
I'm not saying that's a good idea.
No,
No,
right.
it's
In California.
Yeah.
I wouldn't look at California, but I would look at other places that other municipal. Yeah, I think there may be other examples of thresholds that we would want to explore before we set on one.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put the number, I'm going to put a flag beside the number there on line 10.
Yep.
But we have agreed that we will have a vote, a discussion and a vote, whether they do it on the floor or by Australian ballot. We're not going to specify that about whether they should whether they should even adopt the policy of having recalls. And then any specific recall would have to be done by Australian ballot.
Agreed.
Okay,
Right.
Oh, yeah.
okay.
Yeah, that would be ugly in person.
It would be ugly anyway.
Yeah. Well, just the discussion on the floor.
Okay,
Can I just pop?
Yes.
I mean, I guess in general, I just worry that it feels like the wrong time in this moment to have a broad recall provision. Like, I have not heard an outcry for this, and there's a lot of political turmoil that feels very exaggerated in the pandemic.
And,
So I
and
guess
ugly
we'll just-
behavior. Yeah.
It's
Well,
already hard enough to serve and to find people who will serve.
all we're doing is giving the towns the ability to do it if they want to. And
Oh,
By the
okay, that's fair.
this has not, we're not telling them they should have a recall provision, that by the time this gets passed and signed, and a town has the ability to start the conversation, you're talking about a year or two down the line before they would even
Yeah.
be able to implement this, I would think.
Okay, it's enabling them to
Yeah,
then argue about whether to have a recall provision.
right.
And we're mostly talking about what's the minimum threshold we would accept for how many signatures they need.
Not about whether to have a recall, but
Uh-huh.
because the conversation, they don't need any, the
Right,
select.
how many
board-
signatures they would need to recall someone. We're
Yeah,
saying you
yeah.
can't
Yeah.
say it only takes 1% of the
Right,
town.
right.
Okay,
That's right.
that helps. I just wanted to clarify because.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Keisha, I think you raise a good point, because this moment in time is an unhappy and divisive moment. And one can see this being used poorly by there's concern here. I don't disagree with you.
When,
Yeah,
Just to say that if, because it's this two-step process, first they have to say we want it in the first place, and then that is a whole discussion. And then there's the second process, which actually you have to get that threshold of votes. I have run this by Karen, but I think even if we were to bump up that percentage to say 20, 25% or something higher, that I think that makes sense, especially with it, being such a huge issue. And also knowing that if a town were to want a lower threshold, there still is nothing preventing them from going through the whole process of a charter amendment. So they could, get a lower threshold if they feel really adamant about having a lower threshold, but maybe just the standardized threshold is at a higher level, at least as it's, you're getting out of the starting gate and you're making it something that's applicable and available to any community that wants it.
Great. Well, I'll be interested to see what Tucker turns up or Gordon turns up in terms of research on those thresholds.
yeah, and okay.
Is that not good?
It is good. It is good. I just don't want to send them on doing a lot of research around the country when we could just easily say 20 or 25%, because do we really care what other places do?
Well, it would be interesting to find out, A, if this exists in other states as an opportunity for municipalities, and B, find out what their thresholds are. I think it would be useful information.
We could ask
I
for
don't
that.
I think NCSL will be very helpful to Tucker and Gordon. This is why we belong to NCSL and CSG. I mean, hopefully they have this kind of information without too much difficulty. Is that right, Tucker?
Sure. Love looking through NCSL literature. It's a great way to spend a weekend. Right, Gordon?
If it's too much work, let us know. I obviously don't want you to go killing yourself.
I just Googled it on there and they have a whole thing on it.
It's not going to be that challenging.
They have it's done by state, so they have it all written out already.
All right, so let's move on. Can you hear that horn?
Yes.
The car next door apparently is having it.
And as I'm scanning through this, I'm just on the letter A, Alabama and Arkansas, 25% is where they're at. So
Yeah. So, I mean, this is interesting to find out the other states. Thank you, Gwen.
I think otherwise, I mean, when you look at states that have a lot of ballot items and things, you're trying to balance how much people can pour money into just sending people out to get signatures versus how many people in the community actually want that. And so I think it's good to balance it with a slightly higher threshold so that it's not just they're pouring money. If they pour money into the signature process and then pour money into the recall, you can recall a lot of people, without the town agreeing to that.
Okay, So unless we hear otherwise, let's put it at 25. And then we'll discuss that. I'm just going to make a note to myself. Note to self. Okay. Tucker?
That's it. Take a letter.
The next section, section 7, proposes to amend 24 VSA section 138, which is the current general authority for municipalities to adopt a local option tax. This would repeal all of the requirements in subsection A, that formula that you are all probably familiar with for the towns that qualified based on certain property value loss or property tax value loss between the years of 1997 and 1999. All of that would be removed. Subsection B would be left in, which would permit any municipality based on, I'll just read the text. If the legislative body of a municipality by a majority vote recommends, the voters of the municipality may, at an annual or special meeting, by a majority vote of those present and voting, assess any or all of the following: a 1% sales tax, meals and alcoholic beverages tax, or rooms tax. So this would open up local option taxes to any municipality based on a town vote. And unfortunately, I have to leave to go do a walkthrough in another committee, but I trust that Gordon will take excellent notes on anything that comes up from this point forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Tucker. Yes, Senator Clarkson.
So I'd like to, I think this is really a problem. I know people want it, and but having served on Ways and Means, it just becomes a patchwork. I already think it's a problem that places can have their own taxes. I think this is one of the powers of the state. I really think handing it out, I think we should get the tax department in for testimony on this. I think Ways and Means would have a heart attack if they saw this. And I have real challenge with this section.
On the other hand, I completely support this because if some towns have the ability to do it and it's already a patchwork, why shouldn't my town have the ability to do it?
That's because there were trade-offs in Act 60 because certain towns were hammered much more fully than others. And this was a tiny carrot.
But it still is that you can't use the argument about patchwork because it already is.
I agree, but I think we should rein in the patchwork. I don't think it's great. And I have a town that's applied it and I think it's very frustrating. And so I actually think it is something we should talk about with the tax department. And
we can. I think that,
it would be interesting to find out from them how easy or not easy it is for them to deal with all these different towns, how many towns are doing it right now, how many would be eligible.
Every town would be eligible, 250.
Right, but right now, how many towns have a local option tax and have exercised it? That's my question.
Senator Rahm Hinsdale.
I just want to say, as a fellow former Ways and Meanie and someone who introduced this as a standalone bill, I really support this. Towns don't have a lot of opportunities to pull levers to access revenues. And Allison, specifically to that concern you just raised about how much work it is for the state, it's my understanding they claw a piece of this back even when there's a local option tax. They get administrative dollars to support them, probably beyond what they need, frankly. But, I really support this provision. I think it's silly that towns have to come one by one and only certain towns have this power right now.
Yep.
Then I think, why don't we just, anyway, right.
That's just two votes so far.
Yeah, right. No, I'm clear on where you both are.
Okay.
It just reduces the taxing ability of the state. I think that's one of the challenges, is it and that would be Janet, of course, Janet's.
The problem is that, as Keisha said, towns have very limited ability to, the only thing they can do is property tax
Right.
and maybe some fees, but they can't do anything. And the state scoops up, we take all of their money and then we paltrily, is that a good word? give it back to them. And we're fighting about cannabis tax, which is a new source. We won't even give them a new source. So anyway, I don't know where other.
I am open to this conversation. I'm just laying out my concerns.
Yep, we hear it.
I support the idea.
Senator Collmore, do you have an opinion?
I was hoping you wouldn't ask me right now. I think I'm supporting it too.
Can we still at least hear from the tax department?
Sure, we could hear from them. There's a difference between hearing and listening.
Ooh.
I
Everybody
just
else.
wanted to also go along with what Senator Rom Hinsdale said about the administrative costs. It's not just the administrative costs. For every 1%, 0.3 of that percent actually goes to the pilot program. So the state's actually funding their pilot through those towns that levy this tax. So they're actually taking a huge slice of the pie. The towns are actually only retaining 0.7% of that 1%.
I realize
Wow.
that. Maybe we could end that pilot program, given it's been going on for 20 years.
I think it would be easier to pass this than to do that. Okay, let's, Gordon, do you want to, I think the next change is on page 11. Are you prepared to tell us what that says? It starts on line 17.
I don't feel exactly comfortable going through this. I just reviewed it earlier today, but sorry if that's a disappointment.
No, that's fine. I think that in order to keep moving here, I think that we can probably have Gwen or Karen just tell us the essence of what these are, and then if we have questions for Ledge Council, we can flag those. Does that make sense, committee?
Sure.
Sure.
Yes, Tucker did only promise Gordon could take notes, so
That's true.
appreciating Gordon's bravery here.
I noticed that. Okay, Gwen or Karen, do you want to tell us about page 11?
Karen, do you want to take the lead or do you want me to do it?
Why don't you do that one,
Sure.
Gwen?
Yeah. So this is
Thank you.
basically, it's the same thing that was for the select boards and increasing the numbers, but essentially allowing flexibility to have more or less members on zoning boards. So here we're talking about sort of under state law, they're called appropriate municipal panels, but essentially change the number of members that could be appointed by the select boards to a board of adjustment or a development review board. I can't speak to the threshold of the 5% of voters. That was, again, that was Ledge Council's determination that language be added as well, but it would have to go through Australian ballot and approved by the voters to make that adjustment.
Is this such a huge change that it would have to go through Australian ballot? Because this isn't a philosophical change at all. This is just do we want 5 people on our development review board or 6?
I don't think we feel, oh, sorry. VLC doesn't feel strongly about it either way. We just thought if there's fun, I mean, I think our feeling was that if there's fundamental changes to sort of these big boards and the ones that have, a lot of authority. I mean, granted, they don't have a ton of authority, they have advisory authority, and that the voters actually have final say anyways when they make changes to town plans and zoning bylaws and whatnot. But, it might make sense to have voter approval. At the same time, it might not, especially I think the consideration here was like when you have a lot of boards that have a lot of workload and they don't have a lot of, folks available to, handle it. If there are willing and able participants who want to join these boards, they shouldn't have a cap. necessarily at 5 or 7 members to carry that weight, but it would be up to the communities to decide whether or not that makes sense for them.
Yeah, I agree. I think Australian ballot for these boards is like way overkill. I think you just would need select board approval to move them. That's what we did when we changed the size of our Parks Commission. We asked the select board for permission.
And that makes sense because that's what state law is right now, because it's up to the select boards and city councils and boards of aldermen to make those appointments. So it doesn't have to go through the voters for any approval. So that I think we would more lean on the side of it not going through voter approval.
Yeah.
But this removes the cap, right? This is just saying, because in state law right now, there is a cap on how many you can have, not on your tree committee. You probably can have 45 on your tree committee if you wanted. But the DRB and the zoning board do have a cap on them. So what we're saying here is that they can go beyond that cap if they so choose.
Are those the only 2 town commissions that have, the planning commission doesn't have a number?
Yeah, that's the DRB.
No.
Oh, no.
It's not. Our DRB
No.
is very different from our planning commission.
I think our intent was to include the planning commission. I'm not entirely sure why that was drafted. And maybe it was my fault for saying appropriate AMPs, referring to them just as AMPs, but I think planning commissions would make sense as well to add.
I mean, that's, other than the select board, those are the big ones: zoning, planning, DRB, and the Parks Commission. Just joking.
They don't have a cap. And the difference here with what we talked about with the select board is that this doesn't impact the BCAs at all, right?
No,
So
no, you're
right.
not on a BCA because
Right.
you're on an appropriate municipal panel. And I would just say that regarding sub 2, I'm not suggesting you take it out, but really the big problem right now is finding people to serve. To fill the slots that are there.
But it's also like in terms of planning commission, for example, when a town has to re-up their town plan and they're in a race to time to, get it done, having additional members to, let's say, a planning commission might make sense just for, a given period of time, because it spreads out the workload. But then again, if you have a community that doesn't have zoning, but maybe, or does have zoning, but only has a handful of, applications in a given year, capping the number at 5, having the number minimum at 5 might not make sense. Maybe they only need 3 individuals to be on those boards. So it goes both ways. It just depends on the different panels you're talking about.
Seems to me that it's just, all we're doing is allowing the towns to decide how many people they want on those boards.
Right.
We're not telling them how many they have to have. We're telling them, we tell them how many they have to have and how many they can't go above. And all we're doing is saying, you decide.
Sounds good.
I just want to say, there's a tiny provision in our in housing and economic development about allowing the Burlington Housing Authority to increase the number of members on their board. And Michael and I, Senator Sorokin and I, thought, what could be the harm in that? And then we got an email from the other housing authority folks saying they have a problem with it and they'd like to come in and testify. So just, this is fresh from like today in my morning committee. So I just feel like it sounds really simple. And then I thought that was the simplest thing we could support, and there's some kind of issue with it. So I just want to.
Other housing authorities don't want Burlington to increase their numbers?
They said they wanted to be heard on this issue, that it wasn't just sort of a simple.
It wasn't a slam dunk.
I haven't heard what the concern is yet, but I just literally thought this morning, what could be the harm in this? and we were told that there might be something. So I just want to say that.
Interesting. I'm going to work on Monday. I'll find out
Right?
what
You know more than I do.
yeah. So I don't have any problem with this except taking out the Australian ballot piece.
Yep, I would agree with that change. I'm okay with this.
Okay.
But we will wait and hear what Keisha and I hear from the Burlington crowd.
And you were going to add planning commission?
Yes,
Yeah.
and we're adding planning commission. Right.
Yeah. All right, so the next change is on page 13.
I'm gonna step in, sorry to step in here, but this is another, the next two provisions, the starting on, let me see
On
here.
page 12, the middle of
On
the
page
page.
12, the moderator and
Oh.
the trustees of public funds and the cemetery commission, we're not gonna, I guess that's all of section 9. We would recommend striking this section.
Okay. All right,
That's making it easier as we cruise through here.
yeah,
Okay.
okay.
And that would include the following sections that sort of tie the loose ends. So that includes section 10, 11.
Yes, because
And
that's the moderator piece.
Yeah.
Oh, so it would also remove sections 10 and 11
and 12.
through 12. That's a cemetery commission.
Yep. So that covers those 3.
Okay,
And what's the, oh, well. Sure.
all right, so what's your pleasure here, committee? It is now approaching 4:30.
Well, maybe
Since
this.
I've been sitting in this chair since 7 this morning.
Yeah.
I'm
Maybe this
perfectly
is
happy.
about-
I'm actually stuck to it. So I'm perfectly happy to stay for a while, but what is your pleasure, committee, here? Should we keep going through this until for the next 15 minutes and then call it a day?
Yeah,
We have 11 more pages, and I would suggest we call it a day and take a walk.
Oh.
And commit ourselves to some
Solid.
exercise, because it's the warmest day this week. We're getting a ton of snow, and we've been sitting in this chair since 8 a.m. Brian, Jeanette, and I have been sitting mostly all day. I would suggest we boldly, it is 4:17. I would suggest we all go commit our bodies to some exercise and sunshine, vitamin D.
All right, so what I'm hoping that we can get this out next week. So what I'm hoping is that we can then go through the next 11 pages and get answers to the areas that we've flagged and proceed from there.
okay.
And then Gordon, you might ask Tucker if he would be, either you or he would be willing to talk to us a little bit about the section that is in here about the towns with charters and their ability to revert to general law if they want to, instead of having to do an official charter change. And how that relates to the Springfield charter change that's being proposed. And I don't even know where that is, but I do know that this Springfield charter change, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, says they can adopt any charter, any change that has been adopted by any other town's charter, without going through another charter change. And so there is some question about how this relates to that. I don't know that it does, but
That provision, that provision is also in a Winooski charter change and in a Brattleboro one.
and that's different than this. And there's some feeling that perhaps that the provision in here is constitutional and the provision in those is not constitutional. So I just would like us to be clear about that.
Right. Well, it would be simpler, instead of having to do it 3 times in 3 different charters, to do it once in this bill.
That they're different. Their charter says if any other town has
Charter change.
if any other town has had a charter change approved, they can just incorporate that into their charter. That's different than what this says. This says that they can go back to general law.
Oh. Okay.
And for clarity, none of those provisions in charter have passed through the legislature.
Right.
They have been stopped by the legislature, you folks, because legislative council has informed you that they are considered, under their thinking, unconstitutional.
Right.
So this provision is a way to sort of halfway get to where the intent of those provisions are,
Mhm.
in a constitutional manner.
Yeah, so I just want us to make sure that we understand the difference here, because that is a question that has been raised to me by a number of people. So. Okay.
Okay,
Okay, committee, tomorrow, we're going to do the planning office at 1:30, at 2:15, I think. My notes are so in pencil, I can't read them. We're gonna do the St. Albans, we're gonna do the issue about water districts and fees. And we're going to look at 173 again. That's the state planning office. I mean, the state State House Oversight Committee.
Collections policy instead. Yeah. Great. Sounds like
Okay.
a wonderful and exciting day.
Okay. Thank you